do and what you need to do if you're going to bring in potted plants to overwinter them in your home. Now, whether you have flowers or herbs such as basils or plants on the porch that you're wanting to bring in, either overwintering or try to get the most out of them as the evenings and nights get cooler, there's some things in which you need to follow and observe before just taking the plant, walking in the house, and saying, okay, here we go.
Okay, so first, before you even think about what plants you want to bring in, you need to think about if you have a place to bring your plants in. So you have to think about space and lighting.
Space and lighting is important because if you don't have enough space, you're going to have problems. If you don't have enough light, these plants are not going to survive. And some people only have container gardens, and they want to try to bring as many plants in as possible in order to prolong the life of those plants, to get a little bit more out of them as the night, as we get into fall and in the November months in the areas of the country, to see what we can do. If you do not have enough light, obviously a south-facing window is the key location. It gives you a lot of light. Now, during the colder portions of the year, it's not going to give you as much light as obviously the summer will. So you can incorporate a grow light such as the Happy Leaf LED grow light, home gardener's affordability with a professional level of light available to the plants in all levels of spectrums that they do need. So you need to figure out what you need to, where and if you have those requirements.
Right. So you definitely want to think about your light and also your space. Maybe you have a lot of light, but you don't have a lot of space where that light is. So you have to be conscientious of that. You also want to only bring healthy plants in. So if the plant is diseased, it's struggling, it's not doing well.
You're not going to save it. You're not going to baby it. I feel bad. It's going to die.
It's going to die. And if it's your last whatever pepper plant, then hopefully you can grow another one next year. But if you bring it in, it's not going to get better.
It's actually, most times, it's going to get worse because you're bringing it into a closed, contained environment where it will actually increase the problem than if it was outside. So also, you need to do your research on what you're bringing in.
Well, right. And if you can, if it is ideal to bring it in, sometimes, especially if it's a perennial, you want it to stay outside. You want it to get those cold hours. But some perennials you can bring in. So you have to do your research. Something like you can overwinter pepper plants, but there's a way to do it. There's a proper way to do it, so you want to make sure you know how to do it.
That's right. Also, if you bring plants in that are, for example, infested with whiteflies in the yard, you're going to bring them into the house. And because there are no insects inside your home that will
eat the
whiteflies, what happens? Multiply, and the problem becomes even greater.
But there are plants that you can keep in the basement where you want it to go a little bit dormant, and that's okay too. So some tender perennials do like that period of dormancy, so you can overwinter, especially something like a lavender or a rosemary in your garage or basement. If the temperature doesn't go below 20 degrees Fahrenheit, or above 40, they won't freeze, but they will stay dormant. So you don't want to let them dry out, though, so you still have to keep that in mind. If it's out of sight, out of mind, then you want to make sure that you are watering them. You don't have to water them every day or anything like that, but you want to be aware of the soil drying out.
Right. If we're not keeping these, if they're going to dormancy, they don't need, maybe once or twice over the winter they need water. But if you're trying to grow them, you got to keep the water to them. What are the things we need to be aware of here?
If you don't have the space, you could take cuttings, for example, something like a Coleus. Maybe you really like that Coleus. You can propagate that really easily. You could put it in some soil, and then it's going to grow throughout the winter.
Now, Coleus is a green, wide-leaf plant that has a vast variety of colors.
There's all sorts of ones from greens to maroons to pinks to yellows.
And a secret here, and what some people will do is if they're at a restaurant or a gathering and they see a very nice colored one.
I may have done this.
They will take a cutting and put in their purse or the bottom of their shoe and take it home and root it, and then they too will have a cutting, or in about, once it roots, they'll have a plant in the next 6 months of that.
You're just like growing. You're growing for the plant. That's what you're doing.
Well, yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with taking a cutting if you're at a restaurant.
Well, here's the thing with the cuttings. Keep this in mind, and whether you care about this or not, I'm going to put it out there because that's what we do. Some plants are copyrighted, where it is illegal for the grower or the nursery or the homeowner to actually take cuttings off the plant in which they bought. By law, it's illegal to do such. Many people ignore that law, but I'm just saying that does exist.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so anyway, copyrighted plants. This is where we're at now in the world.
Yes, that's
this
right.
This is the huge concern.
Well, I'm just saying here.
Okay.
So, but you can take cuttings from a Coleus, for example, and put it in a very small pot, and then as it grows, you can up-pot it over the winter months, and then you have a very nice plant in order to bring outside in a container in the ground by springtime.
And it'll give you something to do.
Yes.
So the other one is that you want to give favor to your favorite plants. So if you do have a beautiful Coleus and you have the space for it and you want to bring it inside, bring it inside. Or if you have
Prioritize.
Prioritize, right. So if you are like, this is my plant, I put it outside, I do this, X, Y, Z, I've had it for however many years, then definitely don't leave that plant out in the cold.
Yes. Some tender perennials do have a dormancy period, okay?
Yeah.
When it comes to such things like that.
Another thing to keep in mind, as Joe had mentioned, is bugs, and that's one thing is that
I think the number one thing people forget. They bring it inside, and no preparation is performed on that container, and then all of a sudden, like we talked about with the whiteflies, you had 3, now you've got 300 and 3,000 and 30,000 because some of these bugs will multiply, reproduce without mating very rapidly within days of one another.
So I guess you also want to think about is when you're going to bring these plants indoors. You don't want to wait until you have your heat on in your house.
Tomorrow it's going to freeze. I got to bring it in.
Right, exactly. It might be cooler right now today, but then we still have a lot of August left. So you kind of want to think about, just depending on where you are, if the temperature outside is similar to the temperature in your house, you have your windows open, you're kind of moving towards that fall temperature, that's when you want to bring them in.
That transition period. Before you bring them in, regardless if you see an infestation of bugs or nothing, we want to take that plant and we want to blast the water on it to knock any of the dirt, debris, bugs off of it before we bring it inside the home. If you do see a problem with insects, we want to properly identify what bug it is and then see if there is an organic means of removal of that bug without having to use very harsh chemicals on that plant, regardless if it's an edible or ornamental plant that you're bringing into your home. Then the transition can happen, as you were speaking about. The days and temperatures are almost equal from inside and outside, so there is not that shock of immediate 40 degrees to 80 degrees or whatever the temperature is from outside to inside, and these plants have that difficult time adjusting and sometimes will go into shock and drop a lot of their foliage.
Right. And again, you want to do your research, but if you are digging up a plant, you're going to pot it, you might want to kind of baby it outside a little bit while you do that. But make sure you are shaking off the roots and shaking off any sort of insects that you do see on those roots.
If you're bringing a plant in, such as a Coleus or fill in the blank, that's not going that you're trying to keep alive all winter long, so you can take back out next year, we do want to remember that we have to feed these plants some type of fertilizer if it is needing immediate assistance because it is a discoloration of a yellowing because of lack of nitrogen or purple because of a lack of phosphorus. Then you want to go with a liquid fertilizer or a compost tea. If it is healthy and you can apply a granular organic fertilizer, which will slow release over a 60 to 90 day period and will be very beneficial. You just sprinkle it on top, work it in the first inch or so of the container, and you're fine. If you're digging a plant up from outside and trying to take it indoors, based on that type of plant, you may or may not be able to or be successful with it. You do want to put it in good compost or potting soil. You do not want to just set it in the native soil in which it came out of the garden or your flower bed because that can harbor insects and diseases. And that type of soil is not good for containers as it is very compactable in a container state.
Right. That's a good point there.
So if you're going to do this, we want to start thinking about when the right time in which it is to bring these plants in and what you're bringing in order to get them ready for the transformation from outdoors to indoors. And by following these several steps, we are able to do that and have successful having successful plants that will that will be healthy all winter long, or at least somewhat healthy all winter long, in order to get them back out into the garden next year.
For more information, please visit thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.